the back. Great. Hi everyone, welcome to this talk by Sebastian Forsström. Comes from Paradox Arc, head of Paradox Arc, right?
Yep.
Give us a little speech on or talk on how you guys find your next franchises.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Give a big hand to Sebastian.
So hint, my talk is not going to be a little bit about game design, but a more business-heavy talk. So my name is Sebastian Forsström, and I work at a company called Paradox Interactive, which some of you might be familiar with. I have a marketing background. I started out in advertising and then realized I didn't want to sell beer and cars. I wanted to sell things that I care about, which are games. Specifically Paradox games. Today I run a little sub-label called Paradox Arc, and I'm going to explain what that is later. Throughout my career I've worked on games like Surviving Mars, Stellaris, City Skylines, Across the Obelisk, Star Miner, etc. So some of the big ones. When I'm at home and I'm not playing Paradox games, I actually do play Paradox games, but I love Kenshi, RimWorld, and other sort of systemic kind of living world kind of games. That's my thing. So I have a specific mission. I have a job at Paradox Interactive, and that is to find the next Paradox franchise. So essentially, the next Paradox game that people will be playing for decades. That's sort of my small mission. But first, for those of you who might not be super familiar with Paradox, what is Paradox? Paradox was founded on the back of a game company called Target Games. Not quite 30 years ago, but almost. Today we have a number of studios: Triumph, Paradox Development Studio. Paradox Development Studio is actually 5 studios, but that's kind of the umbrella name for it. Iceflake in Finland and Heimimont in Sofia. We also have Paradox Arc, which is another publishing label, aside from the main one, which is Paradox Interactive. And we also just resurrected White Wolf, which is the publisher behind World of Darkness and Vampire, the Masquerade, among other things. We have about 700 employees. We're on the stock exchange, so we're one of the bigger ones in the country. But what's more interesting about us is, of course, it's our games. We're the creators and the publishers of some of the bigger, highly replayable kind of story-generating strategy and management games on Steam, also on console. We have about 6 million players every month, between 6 and 7, depending on what's going on. And throughout the years, I mean, these are kind of our main core games now, but throughout the years we've released a number of other kind of big titles like Magica, Mountain Blade, Pillars of Eternity, games like that. And of course, as I've kind of alluded to, throughout the years, we have grown quite a bit. I think when I started in 2017, since I started, I think our revenue has quadrupled. And as we grew, we kind of realized something a few years ago. We realized that we had stopped signing small games. Because as a company grows, the business logic is that, well, if we are big, anything that is not as big as the stuff we already have is kind of a lost opportunity, right? Because why should we spend time on a game that's small when we could spend that time on, for example, Hearts of Iron, which has 1.2 million players, right? From a pure corporate sense, it doesn't make sense, right? And that's, of course, stupid. And the reason why that's stupid is because almost all of our games were small from the start, right? And Paradox has never been great at launching hits. That has not been our success. Our success has always been to grow stuff over time, over a long period of time. Also, what has happened the past decade is that the expectations on what a Paradox game is has changed, right? If we launched Crusader Kings 2, if anyone is familiar with that game, today, we would not have sold that many copies. People would be very disappointed. People would think that it looks shit, right? Crusader Kings 2, I think launch week had 2,000 concurrent users. Crusader Kings 3 had 98,000. I think Crusader Kings 3 in 2020 was the strategy game of the year. And I would argue, I'm hugely biased obviously, but I would argue that in 2025 it's one of the best RPGs in the world. So put anything next to that, it doesn't look great, right? It's very difficult to compete with that. But we want to make small games. We want to make games from smaller teams that we think can become the next Crusader Kings over time, right? So that's why we had this idea that we wanted to have a different label. So it's still part of Paradox Interactive. You know, the team, we sit actually next to the CK3 team in the building. It's the same company, but it's a different brand essentially. Paradox Arc, our mission is to find the Paradox games of tomorrow. So I usually say that if we have a bad year and we don't release anything that makes an impact, we're probably going to have a negative impact on the profit margin by a couple of percentages. If we have a really good year, we're going to have a positive impact by maybe a couple of percentages. But over a period of time, over 20 years, I think that the difference between having something like this and not having it is being Kodak and not being Kodak, potentially. So that's why we do it. We know that there are independent developers out there, big and small, who share our love for the types of games we make. I mean, we certainly do not have a monopoly on the market in any sort of way. And Paradox Arc's job is to find those teams before everyone else, which is very hard, by the way, and partner with them and take their games to our audience, which is extremely engaged. They buy a lot, they care a lot, and there's a lot of them. So that's sort of our mission. I like to say that I'm not looking for the next CK3, I'm looking for the next CK2. So like a game that can be big over time, that can sit in our portfolio over time. So what's a Paradox game? What is it? What makes for a Paradox game? So very overly simplified, it's a game that you never put down. We don't do games that end. There are fantastic games that are linear and that end, but they're not Paradox games. I'm going to break it down a little bit more because it goes a little bit more into it. We actually have game pillars that guide us when we look at games. So we think that these game pillars essentially describe why our games are successful and why our games behave the way they do. Short Alice, easy to remember. So number 1, agency. A Paradox game gives the players the freedom to live out their fantasies, create their own stories, and express themselves in their creativity. So in the last talk, there was a really good question about writing. If you don't control your world, is that good or bad? Is it lazy writing or not? Is it risky? I think the speaker was saying. For us, our philosophy is the diametrical opposite of that. We actually think that the second that our players are taking over the narrative, we know that we have something, because then they care, right? Then they care enough, then we found something that has a promise that's strong enough that players want to take it. And we have the systems that will allow them to kind of live out their own fantasies, right? I'm going to get more into exactly what goes into that. It's very important for us that our games are players' games, and that we do everything we can to give them the tools to be able to create their own stories in our games. We think that modding is super important to Paradox. I think City Skylines, the original, has more than 150,000 mods at this time, at this point. I was mentioning Crusader Kings 2. I remember when Game of Thrones was a thing, and the biggest Crusader Kings 2 mod was the Game of Thrones mod. And every time there was a new episode of Game of Thrones, we would see a spike in CCU, because people would get back and start to play our game. And that's sort of how we want our games to behave, right? Living worlds. So we think our games are dynamic. They have reactive worlds where forces seem to be pursuing their own goals beyond the control of the player, and this is to create immersion and a willingness to stay in the world. We would prefer a small living world to a big empty world, right? I'm a bigger fan of Oblivion than I am of Skyrim, right? And I'm not, obviously Skyrim is way more successful. Well, actually with the remaster, who knows? But that sort of, there's a philosophical difference there. And it's because we don't want any two games to be the same. Because if they're not, you want to come back for more. You're not going to put it down, right? Kind of a funny saying we have at Paradox is that nobody ever finishes a Paradox game. Nobody ever gets to the end of the timeline. They keep just replaying in the middle because they want to do something different with the start, right? To mess with the simulation. So number 3, this one, you can read this ironically, given that Paradox games, those of you who have tried them know that our UI is not our strong suit. Or rather, the games we make are very difficult to make UIs for. So this used to be called accessible, and we were like, fuck it, that's, what a pipe dream. So we changed it to inviting, because even though our games are incredibly complex, people still learn how to play them for some reason, right? The joke is, after 2,000 hours, you're done with the tutorial. So our games, they have compelling themes with a very clear promise. When I look for games, that's the most important thing that I have. And we're probably not going to make that many accessible games, but we're going to make games hopefully that are accessible enough and the promise is strong enough that you want to learn. So number 4, we have C, which is cerebral. So we don't make games that reward your reflexes. We don't make games that reward, doing the same thing over and over 200 times to perfect, how to do a headshot or whatever. Paradox games, we believe, challenge the players' minds before reflexes. Incredible depth, or I want to add, lots of Paradox games are actually not, the systems themselves are not that deep. There's just so many systems, and that's what creates the depth. But we look at our games sort of as an onion. Whenever you try a new system, you realize there's a new one, and you peel off the next layer, and you keep peeling off the next layer, and it just never ends, right? And that's also kind of a philosophy we have, that we believe if you manage to do that correctly, you will end up with a game people don't want to put down, essentially. But we're not so much into the dopamine. We're into other chemicals. We also believe that we want to have, this one is kind of hard to define. It's sort of an afterthought, really, but we want our games to revolve around themes that people like to engross themselves in completely, right? Like there's no, it's not random that we have a World War II game, right? So that's sort of, we like when people think about our games and what our games are about when they're not playing the game, essentially. That's hard to kind of define, but it's something we think about. And this last one, it's more of a result really than a pillar, I think. But if we do everything right, we have an endless experience. So a game that I've been saying it a few times now, a game that you don't put down. We don't have end states, or we do, but we make our games so that nobody ever wants to reach them. Our games provide engagement for a very long time. So why is that? Why is that? Why do we think that this is important? Is it just because these are the kind of games we want? Well, yes. I mean, that's where it started, right? We didn't start with a massive business plan and come up with this and started that way. I mean, we started by making games we really love, and then they ended up being this. But there is a very clear business logic behind it as well. So what is our ideal? What's our ideal game? I don't know how many of you have been to Steam database. SteamDB is really, really good as a super simple tool just to see how different games and types of games behave in essentially how many players they have at any one point. So this is Hearts of Iron. And this, if you're a capitalist in games, this is a very good curve. It keeps going up. So essentially this is how many players are playing the game right now, right, over time. Clearly we have a very sticky game here, because especially in the beginning, in this period, we almost didn't release any new content at all. But the stickiness was so high that even though our new inflow of new players wasn't that high, it still kept growing because nobody would leave, right? And the question is then, okay, but why is this good? Wouldn't this mean that we can't really make a new game? Well, those of you who know Paradox, you know that we would rather do DLCs. So this is what happens when we have Publisher Weekend, when we have our takeover on Steam. This is the global top sellers on Steam during Publisher Weekend. And all of the ones with little symbols, that's a Paradox product. And this is kind of what happens when you have super sticky games that you can keep releasing content to over time. You can build a massive catalog, right? We have DLCs. Every time we release a DLC for a big expansion for Hearts of Iron, it's like releasing an indie hit every single time. And we do it several times a year. Many of our DLCs sell more than 1 million copies at $20, $30. So that's the business reason why we think it's good. Then of course, is there such a thing as too much? Yes, of course. And we balance that every day, and we everyone in here knows that it's hardly uncontroversial to release as much content as we do, and it's continuously a battle. But what I have found is that players don't really mind that you release a lot of content. They want more content. It's more perception of value, right? What do I get for the money that I spend? And also, what's also kind of the backside is that if you keep growing your catalog of DLCs, the perception can be that it's inaccessible if you're a new player. Because you're like, shit, there's a catalog of 330 euros here. Like, how can I get in, right? So it's not without its drawbacks. But this is the reason, the main corporate reason, if you will, that we make the kind of games that we make, and that we think that we are successful. So, games that we think that are not Paradox games, but that are close to our pillars, just to give you an idea. So I mean, Mount & Blade makes sense. We actually published the first one. Kenshi, Mount & Blade, Wartale, Star Sector, RimWorld, Factorio. If you look at RimWorld, their curve looks exactly like this. They do exactly the same thing. but they charge more on average per DLC, but they also release DLCs more seldom. But their curve is almost identical, and it's an extremely profitable company, Ludion Studios. So where do I come in? Where does Paradox Arc come in this, right? I mean, all of these games are obviously fucking huge and amazing and very difficult to find and super rare, right? Where do I want to be? Well, we're talking about an onion, so here's a different metaphor. So if you think of, like, where can Paradox succeed outside of its core? It's where our audience will go where they are not playing Paradox games, right? So if this is our core audience, I want to be somewhere here. I don't want to be over here. I don't want to sign, I don't know, games that are not close to us, FIFA or whatever. I don't want to sign that because there's zero uplift for me to do that. I'm not the best at marketing games like that. I don't have the audience for those games. If you sign a game like that with us, it's going to be more about how much we invest rather than how much we bring to the table. So I want to be fairly close, but I still have to be far away enough that it means real growth, right? It's just examples of games. This is one of my favorite games of all time. A game I would have loved to have in my portfolio, Kenshi. You can see exactly the same kind of curve, maybe a bit more. But this is essentially what I think Hearts of Iron would look like if Hearts of Iron didn't release DLC. So the spikes are likely free updates and sales. I think these guys, they're leaving a lot of revenue on the table. A lot. RimWorld, even more so. I mean, they're much better at monetizing. You can see what happens when they release DLC. That's what happens. When they release a DLC here, that's like someone releasing an indie game that sells 1.5 million copies. Every time. Reliable as clockwork. So this is a really great game that I really love. But that is not really what we are looking for. Story-driven, linear. Can you play it more than 3 times? Probably not. I mean, you're not going to get that much out of it. It's not that long. It's more of a movie, really. I mean, that's unfair because it's an Obsidian RPG, but you kind of understand what I mean by that. It's everything is relative, of course. If they would probably, like, if they released content, I mean, they would probably get a nice spike, but nothing close to what we're talking about. So how do we find them? Where do we want to be? So this is a tool. It's a pretty expensive tool, unfortunately. It's called Alinea Analytics. Swedish people actually made it. It's essentially a scraper of data from open sources on Steam, PlayStation, Xbox, and etc. And they use a lot of different formulas to calculate overlap between player audiences in wish listing, but also in play, right? So, games that what does this tell us then? What does this screen tell us? Well, this is for Hearts of Iron 4. People who own Hearts of Iron 4, they also play these games. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Paradox games and 5 non-Paradox games, one of which we should have, but we don't. But to me, it's very clear who the audience is for my game, right? I don't like to talk about genre. generally. I think genre is a completely useless way of categorizing games if you look at it from a player perspective, from a market perspective. Nobody thought that everyone thought that CCRPG was dead until Divinity 2, and of course Baldur's Gate. People thought that city building was dead until City Skylines, right? Genre is pretty useless. It's the same as age, same as sex. All of those are very superficial and don't really tell anything about the players. What tells me valuable insights about players is what do they play? What other games do they play? Right? I have more in common with a female retiree in Brazil, 30 years my senior, than I have with someone my age who works in banks and only plays FIFA in Sweden, probably. So this is super important when Paradox Arc looks for new experiences. It's important that we understand the audience that we have, and that we look in places where we think we can find growth. And you can go further or be closer, of course. Sometimes we need to experiment more. We experimented much more in the beginning, but essentially this is our cheat code, right? If we manage to release, I believe that if Paradox Interactive would have released Company of Heroes 2, it would have sold an extra 1 million copies. I'm pretty sure. So this is our current portfolio. We haven't found our runaway yet. Across the Obelisk has sold almost 600,000 copies at this point, which is decent. Star Miner, which I'll talk a little bit more about, is not out yet, but it's tracking pretty well. And it's a very, very good example of what can happen when you tap into the audience that you have. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But we have about 6 games that might get announced. At any one point, we have between 6 and 10 games. Sadly, most of them get cancelled, and that's just the reality of game dev. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So, how do we find them? How do we find these games, these hypothetical games that exist, hopefully? Essentially, the short answer is that we look everywhere. We have a junior game scout who scours Steam, itch, forums, goes to events like this. We have a senior business development who does a lot more, goes to physical events, and of course myself. We have a goal that regardless if it's a game that we have managed to sign or not, if there is a game that comes out on Steam that is successful and that could have been in our portfolio, we have talked to them. That's sort of our goal. That's very difficult to achieve, by the way, because we have 20,000 games on Steam every year. But essentially, we go through about 1,200 pitches per year, 3 people. This is our junior game scout. He goes through that. I don't go through that. Basically what he does is he looks at the promise and the product. Is this a super strong promise? I usually, when I hear him in the background go, holy shit, I know a game is coming. Right? So if you're pitching, if you're on the pitching side, which some of you will be at one point, in order to get past this, and this is the hardest one to get past, because as you can see, there's a pretty big disparity between those two numbers, right? It's the first 10 seconds. Your first slide, your first 10, 20 seconds of your trailer. Most games don't get past that. And it's not because we don't, I mean, if we could choose, we would go through everyone for hours, but it's impossible. So the harsher we are in the beginning, the easier the job is. Do we sometimes miss out because we were not attentive enough? Yeah, fuck, we do. It happens. Sadly, we are also only people. To get to the next stage, I mean, I'm kind of guesstimating here. It's between 50 and 100, depending. We go through maybe between one and three every week. Get past this. So we have a super strong promise. We believe there is a market that's strong. Do they have anything playable? And what does that look like, right? Do I want to play for 10 minutes? Let me tell you, mostly no. Most of the time, you don't want to play past 10 minutes. And that's the harsh reality. Does it align to the kind of games we want to make? Do we think that this game can be something over time, right? Finally, this is where we start to spend a lot of time. When I say first 10 hours, it's actually 6 people playing at least 10 hours. We spend between 50 and 100 hours just on playing a game that we might sign. Then it starts to become about other things. We know it's a really fucking clear promise. We know they have managed to put together a strong playable. We believe the game aligns to some of our pillars. I also want to mention that our pillars, they're not law. It's not the law. Like we don't follow them rigorously, where it's like every game has to be every pillar. It's not an Excel sheet. It's a guide. If you look at some of the games that I have here, none of these do all of them. Just to be very clear. Here is a lot about the team and the plan and the proof that they have. So like I said, don't underestimate how strong your promise needs to be. We're going to be less harsh than the players are going to be towards your game. Very few players have more than, I would say, 5 seconds. If you've seen, there's a guy whose name is Chris Zukovsky, he's like an indie marketing guy. He does a lot of talks and stuff. 50% of what he says is just like he's just guessing, but 50% is actually pretty true and pretty good. And he talks about this research that's been done on how people consume trailers on Steam. And how important it is to have extremely strong promise very early and with a lot of gameplay. And it's because people don't watch a trailer on Steam. They click through the trailer on Steam. They don't watch it through. If you have an intro that is 30 seconds long, that is really ominous, and that's really like moody, 98% of people will never get past the 10 seconds, right? So be harsh to yourselves. Show the money immediately, right? Like I said, is there a market? Do we think it's a product? And that's a big difference between a game and a product, right? A game, you can have a really fucking good game, a really shit product. I'm going to give an example. It's pretty harsh to myself. So this, Stellaris Nexus, this is essentially Stellaris, but you play it multiplayer and every game is less than 1 hour long. The idea was, there's a lot of people who love Stellaris, but not all of them have 20 hours a day to fucking play Stellaris, right? Great idea, I thought. Turns out, people don't want to play less Stellaris, they want to play more. Nobody fucking cared. We had a great game, 94% positive our first month. Fantastic game, big IP. Pretty good idea, I thought. Nobody cared. We put $250,000 in marketing. We had Spiffing Brit, who did a video with 1.5 million views. Nobody cared. So even we fuck up. What's a great promise? We like to say at Paradox, history is a great IP. Why is history a great IP? Because everybody cares. Most people have a perspective at least, right? It's relevant to a lot of people. So when we talk about you can take charge of any nation in the world during World War II and derail history and turn it into the history you would have wanted, that's fucking killer. Like what would happen if German Wehrmacht officers killed Hitler and reinstated the Kaiser instead? What would happen? That's interesting, right? So playable plus pillars, again. Is this a game I see myself putting down soon or not? Is it the most fun thing ever? That's the bar you have on the market today. Especially if you're on mobile. Mobile, I think 160,000 games came out last year. Steam, 20,000. Now, it's a big number, and there's lots of chaff and shit, right? And what I've seen in the exhibition, I mean, you're above. You're top 20%, like just from pure talent. So don't let it get you down. But also, like, don't underestimate how fucking good it needs to be. Like, if you're making a hack and slash, you gotta be better than Diablo, for some reason, right? You're obviously not gonna have a big game like Diablo, but you have to have something that's different and more fun, like, because that's what you're competing against. Why should I play your game and not Diablo? Right? The good thing is that Swedish students have done this many times. If there's one place in the world where we are actually really fucking good at that, it's here. So you should also have confidence, but don't underestimate how hard it is. I'm getting back to what I've been talking about before. This is a game you don't put down. Thirdly, like I was talking about, team plus plan / proof. This is like human stuff, right? Are we going to get along with this team? Are we going to be able to work each other? Are we going to be able to build enough trust that we can say what we actually think? Are they going to take feedback the right way? Are they going to give us feedback if they need to, right? There's a lot of, we talk a lot about that we want to work with teams with high total creative ownership. And what that means is that when I say that the shade of blue is wrong, I don't want the team to just go, yes, okay, we're gonna fix it. That's not what you want. You want a constructive discussion. But I also think that essentially games can't be made by a creative committee. I think you have to have a very strong kind of singular vision. But and if you don't have that, then it's hard enough. It's hard enough to make games. The gods know. Are the terms reasonable? So we have terms, so legal terms that we think are very important. So we want to build games for the next decade. That means that we do not want to end up in a situation where we're not going to be able to keep working on the game after 5 years. That's a no-go for us. And it's not because we want to switch out, we want to be able to switch out developers, because honestly, switching out a developer on a project is the worst. Let me tell you, it's horrible. It's actually the other way around. A lot of the time, developers will want to do something new, even if they've been super successful with a game. They, after 6 years, they want to do something new. We're not in the business of 6 years. We're in the business of 10, 15, 20. Do they have a good plan to release? Like, do they have a good production plan? Do they have a good budget? Is it reasonable? Do they have the staff we think that they need? Or are they vastly underestimating? Building a game, you guys have already learned this. Building a game is like building a house. If you knew how expensive it was going to be at the end, you wouldn't try. So it's a good thing. You don't know how expensive it is at the end. And of course, we know that because we've shipped 80 plus games. So we know that things are going to take longer than what you say. What's important is this reasonable? Is it reasonable? I've had American studios say that they can do games that should take 800 man-months to do in 200. And we're like, how? Pre-production is important. No. I mean, yes, but no. That's not reasonable. Also, super important to add, especially if you're an indie, the best leverage you can ever have when you talk to a publisher is if you have a little bit of traction already. You have a small community that already cares a little bit about your game. That's not your mom and your friends, right? Do you have people you don't know who follow you and who give you scathing feedback, right? If you can show that, that's leverage for you. Because if you don't, then we know that, well, we're going to have to build that from scratch for you. And that's fine, we can do that as well. But it's a different onset, right? So deal types, just a quick, what kind of deal types do we do? I don't think many publishers do this, especially not indie publishers. So we have essentially two tracks, co-publishing deals. So co-publishing, what that means is that the developer stands for the developer costs, as in their salaries. We stand for the publishing costs. Localization, QA, marketing, etc. This is, of course, a way for the developer to keep a bigger part of the revenue than they would have otherwise, but at a higher personal risk, obviously. But if you are in a place where you have a super fun playable, maybe even past alpha, you have a small but strong community, you have a year up to launch, you want to increase your ambition level, and you also need a marketing partner who can really push the big button, this is where you should be, right? Don't give away more than you have to, right? Then we have a prototype track where it's essentially work for hire, so we pay for everything. The demands we have on those projects are much higher because the risk is so much higher. And in my experience, about one in 6 get to market. And that's the harsh economics of it. And then you need to have a certain kind of. Here we own the IP. Here Paradox owns the IP from the start because we paid for everything. Here you own the IP. What we do want here, because like I said, our job is to find the next franchise, not the next hit for a year. We want a way to work with this game essentially forever. Usually that means that we have a so-called buyout clause, which means that at a certain performance we have the right to buy the game, not the studio. Or you can have, that's one way, it's not the only way. We can be flexible as well, but in general, every deal we do, we want to have the option to work on the game forever, because that's our mission. My mission is not to be an indie publisher. Indie publishers, they give a much lower, they take a much lower cut, they invest less, and they don't demand ownership. Because their whole model is about finding the next hit, and the next hit, and the next hit, and the next hit, and the next hit. And it's not it's not better or worse, it's a different model. So what the hell do we do? You've done all the work, you've done this game, and it's super cool, and why should you give anything away to a publisher? So I want to say, first of all, you need to ask yourself a question. If you think that the publisher's existing audience will love your game, number one. Because if they don't, then it's a pure just transaction, right? In the best of worlds, you want to work with a publisher who is known for the kind of game you make and whose audience have a track record of buying them, right? That's how you get from, 1 + 1 is 3, etc. We help you take the game to the next level. So I like to say we would like to be an elevator. it might be your second game or something. You're a small indie studio, but you want to turn it into a sustainable business over a very long period of time. You want to do this for the rest of your life. You want to build something over time. That's where we come in. That's where we're good. We've shipped 80 games. The people on our team have worked on everything from Dark Tide to City Skylines to Bloodlines 2. Worst fucking project in the world to work on. Gonna be a good game now though. You're gonna be surprised. So I like to say we like to take your game from mostly positive to very positive. A really good publisher are the ones that can take you from 70 to 82. Because the difference is massive. The difference is huge. We also help you taking the game to market. You would think that this just means throwing money at influencers. And that's certainly a part of it. Marketing is only ever going to be a modifier on how strong your product already is. So I was mentioning Chris Sokowski earlier. He has another saying that I kind of resonated a little bit with me. A game can either be a bowling ball or a feather. A bowling ball, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at it, it's still just gonna, 100 wish lists, 150, 200. 100 wish lists is nothing. It might as well be zero. Whereas if you have a feather, one trailer can generate you 50, 60, 70, 80,000. Right. So this is a game we found at Steam Next Fest that nobody else was playing or looking at. We thought it had something. It was buried in the throng of 1,500 other games. So we signed it, and then we decided to reposition it, change the packaging, change the name to more align with what we think the market, where the market is and what the market wants. We haven't changed the game at all, mind you. We've changed the product, we've changed the packaging, but not the game at all. The developers, we asked them, why is it called this? Intergalactic logistics and blah, blah, blah space. We're like, people are going to read it as ill space. You know that, right? Oh, no. They're going to read it. They had been out on Steam 3 or 4 years, just as a store page. They had, I want to say 7,000, 8,000 wish lists in 4 years. We did one trailer. It went to 100. That's a difference that the promise can do. Right? Another example is Across the Obelisk, which we signed when they were actually released in early access. They had managed to sell 50,000 copies in a year and a half, which is good for any indie. That's a fantastic number. They did a really good job. It's a great game. But they had completely lost steam, and they wanted to make an impact on 1.0. Across the Obelisk is a deck builder, essentially, like Slay the Spire. But it has co-op. And we're like, why aren't you fronting that more? It's the one thing, it's not a better deck builder than Slay the Spire. That's not where you're going to beat Slay the Spire. Why should anyone play this and not just keep playing Slay the Spire? Well, it has co-op. It's the one you play with your friends, right? That's a strong promise. So we just called it the co-op deck builder. We made a trailer with fucking devs who were like laughing and playing together. We signed some influencers who were friends, and they played it as friends together. I think it sold 500,000 copies so far in the same amount of time. And of course, this is, I'm bringing you the best examples. I have certainly failed, and I have certainly launched games that did not those numbers. But that is when you nail it. When you nail it, that's the difference you can make. Finally, if we do have a game that's alive, that has a community, that grows a little bit every year, that shows that it's sustainable, I think that we're there's nobody else who's good at building over time. As good. There are those who are maybe there are a couple who are as good, but I think we're definitely world class in that. So that's how we do it. So we find them, we sign them, and we try to help them to get where we want to be. And then add 10 years. You know, everything takes 10 years. CK2 was not built in 1 year. Or Crusader Kings. Hearts of Iron 4 became big at number 4, right? Most of our games become big at DLC number 3. Surviving Mars had a very strong release week, but then had quality issues, so sales died down very quickly. At DLC number 3, we sold as many base games as we did during release week, that same week. So it's you know, you need to be patient, but you also need to have a sustainable kind of business from the start. That's more important to us. So to summarize, super strong promise, adjacent audience, reasonable plan cost, and patience. That's what we think we can be. So that's that.
Yeah, let's give Sebastian a big hand. Thank you so much. Very, very interesting. Lots of good insights. Hopefully, not too many like crazy reality checks.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I think
I'm like, you know, I'm at like the most corporate fucking publisher in Sweden.
We're all very, very thankful you came. There's a bit of time for some questions in the audience. I can pass this little microphone around. Do we have any questions? Yeah, let's start here with Kelly.
All right, so you mentioned early on that you're trying to predict the market and find a new game franchise for Paradox.
Trying.
Try. And if you look at the current game market, you have a lot of big games with massive fundings flopping after the first 2 weeks. So I was just wondering, when you talk about this selective process at Paradox, when games get at the second selective stage, where there's 100 to 50 games left, what are some of the warning bells Paradox have, or some of the mistakes you see game developers do at that stage?
Good question. So most of the time, games will fail here because the first playable is just not strong enough and won't keep me playing. I think that a lot of developers want to maybe show a little bit too much, and they lose the loop. They focus on other things than the loop, but the loop is the thing that's going to keep you staying for more than 10 minutes, essentially, right? And there are professional studios that, you know, make this mistake. You know, they will come in at alpha, and they will still not have a working loop, and that's where most games die. So make it, you know, make an impression immediately. It's kind of you know, don't fuck around with that. Be more concise than you think and cut to the core. We don't need fancy graphics. We don't give a shit about that. You know, I can't speak to all publishers, by the way. This is very much Paradox, which is a very systems-heavy sort of publisher. But you know, having a playable with white boxes, but that is addictive, is much better than a fancy art bible and you know, ominous intro. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. Any other questions? Saw some hands. Let's go with Douglas here, and then I'll come around.
So you talked about how Paradox monetizes their games. Are you looking for like other games that monetize the same way, or can it be other things?
Really good question. I think that we are not. I mean, that's what we do best. That said, we have been chasing other ways of monetizing our games for as long as I've worked at Paradox. It's just we haven't been that successful yet. We do We have dabbled in subscription, for example, for some of our older games with massive back catalogs. We've done pretty decently successfully, as I would add. So the question is, the business model, it's not an automatic no if it's not a premium DLC business model. That's definitely not. It's more about recurring revenue. That's more important. So if your business model is, I'm gonna release one game and that's it, and then I'm just gonna do free updates, not for us.
Good question. I think I'll take the and there was Marcus, I think. Welcome around.
Thanks. So if you would have to give practical advice to somebody that, a studio, they think they have a game that has all the qualities that you say, and they want to get to that first cutthroat stage of the 1,200, what would be your practical advice for them to get there?
Sorry, say again.
Practical advice to get to the first kind of stage of the 1,200 games that then get caught, if you think you already have a game that can get there.
What to do, like how to present it?
I know how to even get the chance to present it. How do you get there? What are the ways? What are the practical advice?
So it's I'm being a bit boring, but there was a I was doing the business pitch event yesterday, and there was a really cool pitch where essentially the presentation was a rundown of the features. And my advice to them was, condense this into what is your player promise. Why is this the best things in sliced bread? If you are gonna make a stab at, I don't know. Well, I was making the example Diablo, a Diablo-like or a game like that. You need to have in the first slide one paragraph that tells me exactly why a million people are going to think that they're going to try this and not play Diablo, and that's so hard. It's very hard to do that, but it's kind of the same advice as I gave you, but at just an earlier stage. Here you want to get past the first 10 seconds. What can you do in 10 seconds, right? You can do a trailer, you can do a slide, you can do a store page. Right? When I said earlier, when we find something on Steam, also I want to say, when we find something on Steam, it's usually too late, because then it already has traction, and there's like 58 publishers, and they're usually in a position where they're like, well, I don't fucking need a publisher, I already have traction, right? But what happens when it catches our eye is that my junior game scout looks at the little description at the top right, reads it, goes, shit, this is a Paradox product, looks at the screenshot, goes, fuck, this looks so good, holy shit. And he will say it out loud. Like, what can you say that will make people who don't know you, and who don't care about you, and who don't care about your game, say holy shit when they see your store page? That really is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I think maybe also part of the question is, can they email you if they think they have a game that fits perfectly?
Yes. Fuck, I should have included that. Yes. So it's on the website. So we have an email called newgames@paradoxinteractive.com. Double check. It's on the website. Fuck, I can do it now. And we read everything. We do read everything. We don't call you back every time because we have 1,200, and that's a lot of calls. But we do read everything. Also, connect with me on LinkedIn. Please do. When the talk is over, feel free to approach me and add me on LinkedIn, and can send me a DM, and I will send it along to my scouts. We don't have. Oops.
There's the C.
There's a C. There's a C. I'm gonna see if I can find it. This is gonna be fuck. There we go. Paradox Arc. There you go. Right there. Just click that. That's how you reach us.
Great. I'll let you get the last question, and then, because we're already 5 minutes over, so if that's okay with you, Sebastian?
Yeah.
Do the last one?
Sure.
Yeah.
So my question is, why don't you have your Sims or your survival games, or do you? You have
So
too
we had
many.
this game called Life by You, which we spent hundreds of millions on and we then killed, unfortunately. We have tried to do Sims. Having the Sims game is a lifelong Paradox dream. I would love to have a Sims game which is less goofy, more for adults, which is even more systemic, more open, more moddable. That's a dream we've had for a very long time. Survival crafting games, 100%. What kind of survival crafting game would I have? I would have something that's less action and more cerebral, if you will. I think The Long Dark is a pretty good example of that. Would have loved to have that game. I have signed survival crafting games several times that unfortunately didn't make it. Yeah, good question. I asked the same question.
All right, great. Thanks, everyone. Let's give Sebastian one more hand.
Thank you.